Hello and welcome to the Catch a Lift Coaches Corner. I am Cal Coach and Program Director Melissa, and this week I'm honored to introduce a previous episode of Coaches Corner featuring U.S. Marine Corps veteran and Cal veteran athlete Ed Zamora. We would like to thank Ed for sharing his story and his light with us all, and we would like to thank ID Technologies for sponsoring the Coaches Corner podcast. Now, sit back, keep it real, and enjoy the show.
Hey, Melissa, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
We're so happy to have you on today and very excited to talk to you about your wonderful journey. Let's jump right in, Ed. Let's start by talking about your service. And if you could kind of start, Ed, tell us about how your family's, previous service drew you to also serve.
Yeah, going back to my dad. My dad's a Vietnam veteran. So growing up, he had his boot camp picture, like we all take, with a half cut off blouse and a cover, and so that's where I began asking about what that was, what that meant. He'd show me his rifle expert badge with cross rifles, and I was just like really amazed by all of it as a kid. All those kids like to play war and GI Joes and all this stuff. So it kind of really began there with my dad, and kind of always stayed in the back of my mind, even coming in through graduating high school. And it was actually a little after I graduated that I ended up enlisting. And just a little different path. I was a little bit older, but still needed that structure and and a good swift kick to the butt to get me going in the right direction. So that's how it all began.
What was it, Ed, specifically about the Marines that made you choose that you wanted to be a Marine?
I think, like every other Marine that enlists in the Marine Corps, we grow up with this idea and this picture of being the best. Obviously, all of us services are gonna bicker and fight about that, but we had the cool commercials, slaying the dragon, and with the Marine doing sword manual, and it just seemed a step above, and the harder boot camp and all this stuff that probably the recruiter gives us a little prettier picture than things are.
Right.
But yeah, that it was no question in the beginning that that I wanted to become a Marine. I wanted to earn that title, and of course, it was, I wanted to make my dad proud. So, I ended up choosing the Marine Corps. And as soon as the recruiters found out that my dad was a Vietnam Marine, they were just like, it wouldn't let me leave the office. So,
I'm sure.
And it's pretty funny.
Ed, where and when did you deploy?
So I deployed for the first time in 2002. We did a Westpac float with the 11th Marine Expeditionary Unit, and that's out of San Diego. But I was with 3-1 Battalion Landing Team 3-1, and we deployed in support of Operation Enduring Freedom. At the time, it was right before the 1-year anniversary of September 11th attacks, and so we were. There's a picture that floats around online of the USS Bellwood in the deck. There's a picture above it that has 911 that's roll on the flight deck. So that was us. That was
really?
That was
oh my gosh! Wow.
Yep. And so we went out into the Middle East area. We did different training exercises around Africa, Guam. I mean, we went a lot of different places. And there was some crazy stuff that happened on that deployment. By crazy, I mean things that we didn't expect to happen. I know that one of the companies had gotten attacked by an Al Qaeda cell in Falaka Island, I believe, which is off of Kuwait. So it was kind of, and then we lost a Marine at sea. So that was our first time as junior Marines that we experienced loss, in a unit. And, that second one was really, I mean, both of them, the attack and then losing the Marine at sea, it was just, super sad. It was something that really resonated with us. And it's like, okay, this is everything we do in the military is dangerous. Training, deployments, no matter where you're at.
Yeah.
So we did that. It was summer to December of 2002. I believe we got home like December 15th, and ended up being like a short Liberty port because we got recalled. I believe a few weeks later, and I remember getting a phone call at home. I lived out in base housing, and they're like, "Yeah, Lance Corporal Zamora, I need you to report to the company grinder 06 minutes." And I was waiting for them to say, "Ha, just kidding, got you."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Really? I just went on leave." They're like, "Well, you need to be back." And so a lot of, most of us showed up like really still not believing, like, is this, we just got home. How are we getting
Right.
recalled? And there had been like little rumors on our float on our way back. Oh yeah, there's something going on in Iraq, but the we call it Lance Corporal
Yeah.
Underground, rumor mill, like so.
That's funny.
Yeah, and so no one really paid it any attention.
Yeah, no one was taking that real serious yet.
No,
Yeah.
and so we, yeah, I mean, it was true. We came back, and it wasn't but a month later, I believe, that we were back on a different ship heading back to the Middle East, and it really took some time to really sink in. Like, are we really doing this? Or we just left here. Um, Ship broke down. I don't know how many times we were there, and on our en route, and I think we ended up pulling into Guam to get the ship fixed. And we Marines, we're going to war. We didn't take civilian attire, so they weren't going to let us off the ship. And I guess the commanders we had were awesome. The leadership, and they were like, no, these men need to get off. They need to blow some steam off,
Right.
and they need to drink some beers. So they brought a party out to us on the pier and let
Oh
us
my
get off.
gosh.
So yeah, and that was one of the times where our staff NCOs, and we had a lot of staff NCOs that had been part of the first Gulf War. That
Okay.
were our leaders and senior staff NCOs. So that night, I remember us all being together, like brothers, drinking, and obviously that respect's still there, and lines
Right.
not to cross with first sergeant, and but it was more of a true brotherhood, and we had a great time. And I remember it was raining like crazy, and none of us cared. We were just out there, and we didn't know at that point whether that'd be the last time we'd have beers together. So we finally got to Kuwait. I think I forgot how long it took us to get there, and then the waiting began. For the March invasion in 2003. So
Wow.
yeah, it was a bit of a journey just to get there.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, I can't even imagine that. So much sticks out to me personally, Ed, from that period of time. When the invasion was coming around in March, I would be a junior in high school, and
Mm-hmm.
I was 17 at the time, and I would enlist in the Army National Guard on the day the invasion began.
Oh wow.
And I remember watching that invasion on TV. At the time it was like Fox News, like Operation Shock and all. Like I remember it. I remember watching that invasion. Ed,
Yeah.
would you talk to us about what it was like to be a Marine in the invasion of Iraq in 2003?
Yeah, definitely. And I remember that. It still gives me goosebumps, honestly, every time I think back about that time, because it was, we didn't know what to expect. We had been there waiting and waiting out in the desert, and we'd had training. Actually, kind of got hurt in training, jumping out of dump trucks, and my ankle was pretty blown up like a balloon. And I remember I was ordered to sit in the tent for like the last 2 weeks before we left because I was basically given the, you know do you want to go home or do you want to continue on with this? And
Yeah.
there was no way in hell I was going home. So they're like, all right, well, you're going to sit there and you're going to get well. So, one night we just picked up and moved out into the middle of the desert. And they're like, well, it's time. And I remember hearing the planes going overhead right before the bombing campaign started. We all, had last minute motivational speeches from, our platoon sergeants and platoon commanders, and it was on. It was a long. It seemed like one long day. For the following, month, at least 2 months. It was just constant movement. We went from Kuwait past the line of departure. We were supposed to do, as fast as we could to get to Baghdad. So, I mean, our main objective was just to clear the route for the First Marine Division. And there was a few different units of, RCT 1, I think, RCT 5, and I think we kind of mostly leapfrogged to the front of the line and basically cleared the MSR and made sure that the whole convoy could get there. And so I mean, we did that city and town after town, and sporadic pockets of resistance. And in the early days, it was a lot of, they would want to, surrender, mostly a lot of surrendering, and then they were doing that as ambush tactics.
Right. Yep.
So it was just, it was just different. You had a vision set up in your mind how you think things might look, and it was totally different. As we continued to move north, things got greener, and it was just surreal. There was a lot of people that you could tell wanted us there, cheering for us, kind of kids. I was a young father at the time, so that really hit home for me.
Yeah.
We continued moving north. I mean, I think it was like we didn't have showers for like 2 or 3 months, I believe. Yeah, I remember having my last pair of socks. It looked like 2 pieces of bacon, crispy and brown.
Man, I can imagine. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was, and we were still in mop gear. We were in mop and mop. I can't even remember the order 1, 2, 3, 4, but we were.
Touch on that a little bit, Ed. So, people that might not remember, about, the real threat and fear at that time about we didn't know what was going to happen with biological warfare or anything like that.
Yeah. I mean,
to be there during that and you didn't know what was coming.
No, when we first got to Kuwait, I remember that there was already a lot of units there. And I remember we were walking in, and then they called like a gas alarm, and it's like, what the, so we all donned our masks and cleared, and we're like, okay, so we're doing these drills to get ready for a gas attack. And I remember when we were dug in right before the invasion started, we first started getting calls over the radio about, gas, and sitting in the hole with our gas mask in the desert, and it's like crazy to think, okay, are we, actually going to get hit with some of this stuff? So we did. We started off in mop suits, mission-oriented protective posture, right? And so I remember one time we geared up everything but our masks, which was boots, trousers, jacket, gloves, I believe, as we would patrol through some of these cities, because we didn't know whether or not, I mean, there's sewage everywhere, there's water, you know what I mean? There was just so many stuff. But I remember a few times trying to put all this stuff in, and there's like 30 Marines packed in the back of this Amtrak, and it's, tensions flared a little bit, but that's what Marines do. We slap and punch each other, not get the dumbness out of there, and back to what the mission needs. So it was. I can't remember the timeline how long we wore mop suits, but it was. I remember when we finally got the order that we could take all that stuff off. We were like, okay, well, maybe that means we're going home, because at that point there was no set time. We were going there, and we didn't know when it was going to be over, when we could go back home. We had already been gone, 7 months or so prior to even going in there. So it was a lot of unknown. There was a lot of communication breakdown. I mean, that wasn't just, for us junior Marines, but I mean, I remember even at the higher, I was in the track with my platoon commander, who I'm great friends with still, Brian von Kraus, and he even a lot of times he didn't know exactly what was going on. So it's like, okay, that's huge, when our officers don't know. I mean, obviously he still had everything under control, had us under control, knew everything that was going on, but there's still that aspect of not knowing exactly the overall, what's going on everywhere. So there was a lot of learning lessons to be learned early on. I remember the first time, everyone in the military hates shaving, right? We always complain about shaving. But I remember the first time pulling out of a city, and we hadn't been able to shave. I mean, we still hadn't showered, but I can't remember, we already had 5 o'clock shadows going and stuff. And just sitting there in the sun and shaving. And I still remember the feeling of the sun on the bottom of my feet and how good it felt. And it might have just been momentarily, amidst all the chaos, but it was like even little things like shaving and brushing your teeth felt so good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I remember we outrun our supply lines, and we got too far ahead. We didn't get resupplied with food or water for like 3 days. We went through the trash, sifted through trash on the side of the road, looking for food. Yeah, so things were a little different in the beginning. That little things like that. But I mean, I'm sure there's many units that have different stories. But yeah, that was what it was like for us in the beginning.
Wow. Ed, thank you for telling us about the invasion and kind of walking us through what that looked like for you. It's absolutely fascinating.
Yeah.
So Ed, after your time in the Marine Corps, you'd obviously transition out back into civilian life.
Mm-hmm.
Talk to us about how that was for you, especially early on.
Yeah. Well, the plan, since I was married already, we had our son. Actually, we had just had our second son, Anthony. He was born in a naval hospital, Camp Pendleton, in beginning of 2004. I mentioned earlier that I had gotten hurt, before we went with my ankle. It was a series of issues that happened with my ankle, and I ended up having to have a couple surgeries and a med board, and it's the reason why I didn't end up deploying with 3-1 for our last or our third deployment would have been. And it was rough. I was in the CP, started getting casualty reports, when the guys were over in Fallujah, and it really, it put me in a bad place. I had already felt like I should have been there, and it only compounded that. And I said, okay, you know what? I'm done. I need to get away from this area. And that was November. My EAS was in December, and instead of reenlisting, I walked away. I left those gates of San Onofre, headed north on the 5, and never looked back. So yeah, January 2005, I started transitioning into the workforce. Moved to a new city. We had just bought a house in Bakersfield, California. Didn't know what I was going to do yet. Didn't have a plan. Didn't, nothing. All I knew is that I needed to get away.
Yeah.
Luckily, I started working in the oil fields, working long days, 16-hour days. It was good work. Almost got killed my fourth day on the job. I got this nice little scar down my forehead. But yeah, and then the first thing out of my mouth was like, I can't miss work tomorrow. And they're like, what the heck? These Marines are crazy. And which I didn't. I was still at work the next day. But but yeah, it was like, the transition. Quickly, I realized that nobody cared if you were a corporal or sergeant. No one cared that you were, with First Marine Regiment. No one cared about any of that stuff. Oh, you were in Iraq. Okay. Anyways, go grab me that, whatever,
Right.
You're just a new guy on location.
Yep.
You're just a trainee. And it's hard to deal with that. And it's easy to kind of lose focus, and if you got a little bit of maybe depression, not even realizing you are depressed, it kind of starts to compound things a little bit. And so that's what it was, I was really uninformed. I didn't know much. I didn't know much about the VA. I didn't know how to start using my GI Bill. There was no social media like we talked about before.
Yep.
So I felt alone. I felt, I remember wanting to re-enlist and going down to the recruiter and starting that process. And I ended up getting, some advice from, I started going to church, and a pastor told me, that wouldn't be a good idea. You shouldn't do that. And I understand at the time there were, it was a small church, and they were enjoying the new people coming, and they probably didn't want to see our family leave, So I said, okay, maybe you're right. And I didn't. I let that go by, and kept working. And it was maybe a year later until I started to notice a little bit more veterans our era veterans, from OEF, OIF, start to come into the workforce. But even then, it was still, for the most part, I ran into guys that were veterans, and it's like, I would be happy and like, hey, brother, I was a 3-1, this and that, and they had been so far removed from the military that to them it was kind of like a different life. They
Right.
didn't have no.
Yep.
And I'm not, just like, when peacetime versus combat time, or
Right. Yep.
it was just a little different. It was
Yeah.
different. So I didn't understand that part either. So I started to kind of even pull back from that when I would see, people with hats,
Yeah.
T-shirts,
Yep.
Marines, we throw our Eagle, Globe, and Anchor everywhere, and so I started even pulling back from that, and Vietnam veterans were everywhere, around the VA, or, it was always, and always had that respect, because since my dad was a Vietnam
Right.
vet, that it was like a father figure,
Right. Yep.
uncle type,
Yeah.
gave them the respect that they deserved and they should have always had since the beginning. Um, but I remember telling my wife, that it's different. That's not, they're from Vietnam. It's not like what we experienced. You know, um, I didn't know yet. I hadn't started talking to them
Yeah.
yet.
Right.
Because, later on, I would come to find that those guys saved my life. They honestly did. It
Those
wouldn't be for a
Vietnam
few
vets.
years.
Yeah.
Yes, it wouldn't be for a few years after that. But I ended up eating my words, um, and learning really quick
Yeah.
that, yeah, they were definitely a godsend. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's interesting, you and Ed, you and I have talked about it a bit. So I came home from Iraq, right, like end of 2005, early 2006, and you were in those early years too of the wars, and early on, right, there was a little bit of social media, not really much to speak of
Yeah.
yet. Trying to connect with other OEF, OIF veterans was very difficult. In that landscape, there wasn't these organizations like Catch a Lift yet, that were there to help us. We're so very fortunate now with the different resources available to us, but it really was a very interesting time, I think, to kind of transition out. And I do know what you mean about, for myself, it looked a little bit different, but just kind of like I started to do the same thing, Ed, where I'd pull back and I'd stop mentioning even that I was a veteran, because I'm just like, where do I fit into this scheme in this community? Like, it didn't make sense to me, and I didn't know where I belonged in it, and that took many, many, many years. And I
Yep.
think a lot of veterans, kind of from our same age group or that deployed in those years, kind of definitely experienced that too. So Ed, you were very fortunate with, a strong family, strong support system through these years, in particular your wife. Would you tell us about your wife and, the two of you and your wonderful family, and what their support has done for you in your recovery?
I mean, yeah, really, she, in the beginning, I didn't understand. I was stuck in the, um, but wait, I was the one that deployed. I was the one that served, and
Yep. Yep.
so ignorant to the
Yeah.
fact that, even though we were over there doing what we needed to do, there were still issues here at home. She was basically a single mother. She was working. She had my son in school. There was so many things going on, finances,
Yeah.
so much stress involved with her just being here without, me, or her partner, and her help and her shoulder. So, finally, once I started realizing that and seeing everything that she had done and been through and experienced, I mean, going back, I mean, we've been together longer now than we were. We got married super young. We were dating in high school. Um, we know each other more now, been with each other longer than we were with our parents.
Yeah.
We moved out so young.
Yeah.
Our parents and our family remember us as kids and teenagers for a little bit, but for the most part, we grew up together. And um, so she's been there. She's been this rock for me. At first she downplayed a lot of the symptoms that I was having with the depression and anxiety, and I think, people say, well, she was in denial, at first I might have thought that's too, but in retrospect, I see that what she was doing was trying to show me that, you're still strong. You can still get through this. You're not broken. Yeah, you get overwhelmed a little bit some days. You get stuck in this rut, but come on, go outside. So she was there to get me talking when I would sit in front of a TV or an empty room and stare at a wall for literally hours and hours, just waiting for the sun to go down. I think we mentioned it when we talked before. It was, there's a difference between existing and living.
Yes.
And I was just existing. I didn't want to. I didn't want to go on. I mean, there was so much my kids, but there was just a part of me that it was empty, and um, she was there. I mean, to the point. I mean, I'll be candid. She put me in a room and took all these sharp objects away from me, took my shoelaces away from me, locked me in there for 2 days because I got to the point where I understood why so many of our brothers and sisters were taking their own life. I felt it, and I said, "Man, this sucks.
Yeah.
This is why so many check out."
Yeah.
And I finally, she stayed home from work, and we started calling phone numbers for the first time and asking for help.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, if there would have been no one else there for me. I mean, there's a lot of things that I've learned, through courses or, from other veterans that are great tools. But at the end of the day, it's got to be you and your family, your support system that's going to have to get you through those really dark times. And it led me into going down to the vet center. And the vet center in Citrus Heights is started by Vietnam veterans. So I found myself in that office with Hugo was my therapist, and many tears, and he finally asked me one day, and he's like, what would Strader say? What would Dennis tell you? What would all these guys say? And I just said, they probably tell me to wake up, Z, wake up and start living. Why are you doing it? And that was, I think, the first time where the light at the end of the tunnel, it was a pinhole, pinhole of light. It was shining through, and I mean that, and then of course with my kids, and but it was at that point I realized, okay, I have to do something different. And yeah, and my wife was there. I mean, she took time out of work. I mean, she drove me to the VA, and even sometimes where she needed to force me to get into the car because I didn't want to have nothing to do with it. I was inside. I was up all night, sleeping during the days. All the windows, blinds drawn in the dark. Yeah, had it not been for her and my kids, and I mean, a lesser person would have walked away. They wouldn't have wanted to deal with. I mean, I don't think I would have dealt with myself, honestly. I mean, if it was,
I know. Looking back at some of that, I know.
Yeah,
I know that
and
feeling.
I remember, and for me, and medications has always been kind of one of those areas where a lot of people do not believe in that. They don't want to try that, and I was that way. I was, and to that point where I realized, look, I need something to help.
Right.
So I said, okay, I'm going to give this an honest to God effort to try medications, and that was another part of the recovery. I remember it was probably a month or two once all the right cocktail that could figure out. I remember waking up one day and I felt different, and I was afraid to say that out loud because I didn't want that feeling to go away. So for the first time in years, I felt different, and I said, okay, this can work. Started getting into more therapy. Started opening it up a little bit more. Started seeing other veterans come out into civilian life, and I could see myself and them where they were at that point, and going to after war groups and kind of telling these guys, you got to keep pushing forward. Things will get better. You got to find something to latch onto.
Right.
And a lot of them, were married. Same thing. Some not. some multiple times, but I mean, I through my experience, it's been the people that have a good support, that person that's in their corner,
Yes.
that's willing to put up all your BS, and tell you to shut up and listen when you need to hear it. So, I mean, that's yeah. I mean, family support system. That's the way you gotta have something right there.
It's so very important. And time and time again on here, Ed, we have men and women come on, and they talk about it's like, what got you through that transition, what got you through, the early stages recovering from your injuries, and it's a significant other, it's a family member, it's that caregiver person who took on that
Hmm.
role. And it's an absolutely remarkable thing. And like when you said, Ed, if it had been on the other foot, would I have been able to stay there and endure that? And I look at my husband and I think the same thing, the things, that, he went through with me for years and years. And um, it humbles
So,
me. It's
yeah,
humbling to think that there's people out there that love us that much and will put that
yeah,
much into us in our recovery. I mean, it's amazing, and they deserve all the credit in the world, these caregivers and family members that take on this role. Absolutely. Something else, you said, Ed, that I think is so important and that so many of us can agree with is you have to find something to grab onto,
yes,
and like you're looking for that pinhole of light, and then you've got to grab it and just, hold on no matter what. For myself, it was fitness did that. It looks different for everybody, but it's like, man, you need support and you need to find something, that you can hold on to. However small, it'll grow.
yep,
So
definitely,
let's talk about fitness, Ed, and
yeah,
how that's changed your recovery. Because I know fitness has been a very big part of your recovery and your whole family.
yeah,
So let's talk to me about
yeah.
fitness and how it's changed your recovery, Ed.
It's one of those things that, especially when you're down in the dumps and you don't want someone telling you need to just get up and go run 3 miles. And it's like, yeah,
That's the last thing you want to hear. Get out of
sure,
here.
buddy. Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Or, you need to clean up what you're eating. And it's like,
yeah,
yeah, right. I've been eating comfort eating for years, and you want anything to make you feel good. That was another, area where I didn't realize that I was replacing, substance with food because I wanted that feel good. I wanted that, that comfort, something to fill that hole.
yeah,
So yeah, but it's true. I have to admit, fitness, even the little goals, the little accomplishments, of even starting off with just consistency. You know, you start one day after another, and I'm not thinking, well, 6 months from now I'm going to be this, and next week you're already. It's too difficult. I can't get there. Once you look back at these little steps, and it's like, wow, it's been a month already. And I've been walking every day consistently. So that's your first little victory. So, but with fitness, it helped with my anxiety. That was another thing. As I'm getting older now, our bodies hurt a whole lot more.
yeah,
So you got to pay attention. And
yeah,
so it was, something as little as not wearing earphones when I first started working out again. That way I could listen to myself breathe. Because I know when anxiety starts to pick up, my breathing would start getting, and I still do that. Sometimes, as a matter of fact, last night, my wife told me, we were watching, we watch a lot of true crime and this, and I start holding my breath, and she's like, breathe easy, and it's like, okay, mindfulness.
yes,
Mindfulness is
yes,
huge. Don't beat yourself up over
yep,
everything. You're not going to be perfect 100% of the time. Last time I checked, there was none of us that were perfect.
yep, 100%.
Um,
Yep,
so it's like you gotta understand that every day there's gonna be something come up to throw you off. Hey, that's fine. Accept it. Tomorrow's a new day. It got to a point where I would start something, and then 4 or 5 days later, it's like, oh, I can't keep up this pace. Forget it. There's no way. Instead, I started to shift it. Okay, well, today was a win. I wanted to not eat fast food, and I wanted to, walk around the block. And that was a win. The next day, I was too sore, whatever the case may be. I was too calorie deficient. I wanted to eat a little bit more.
yeah,
Okay, fine, I did. But you know what? barely 2 o'clock. Let me do a night walk. Let me go for an evening stroll. So that way, that victory doesn't have to wait till tomorrow. I finish today off better than it started. Um, Little shifts in mindset like that.
It's so big. They become so
Yeah,
big, right? Because they just continue to build.
it just continues to build. I started realizing that my sleep was getting better. I was having more energy. Um, I was thinking a whole lot clearer. I wouldn't get stuck going down those rabbit holes as much. And even when I did, I'd come back to the mindfulness aspect and think about why. Okay, slow down and ask yourself why. Why did I get to this point? What's going on? What can I change? It's an as simplest thing when people say, I'm so sick of being sick and tired. You got to make a conscious effort to change that
Right.
and stick to it. So I was at that point. I was ready for huge changes, and this was, I'd say, probably not too long after last year's Taji 100 that I really started looking at. Okay, I am a type 2 diabetic, which I can reverse if I start watching what I eat and start living a healthier lifestyle. High blood pressure, same thing, has to do with weight gain.
Yep.
So little by little, making those a priority over what a scale was saying, you know. And I think a lot of people, I mean, me myself, that was my number one enemy was a scale, and it always had been. And
Right.
I think I started going and I did some programs with Winter Warrior Project where it was, we did a 90-day coaching program, which was great. I learned so much for them. Thank you guys for that. And I learned to, more about mindfulness and more about, small goals. And I was tracking weight just for a little bit during that time, but I really was looking at, the medication wise, reducing that. And then, something as simple as, my t-shirts fitting me different. I got my original Catch and Lift t-shirt that I got, I think 2015, maybe.
That's awesome.
I hadn't worn this t-shirt in probably 5 years because it was just too small. And it's an XL, it's like, I'm only 5'4". I shouldn't be wearing 3XL t-shirt, and, so it was like I started paying attention more to how my clothes fit and how I felt. So forget the scale. I mean, you can check in with it, but that was another one of those little steps. And then, my family, all my family, we talked a little bit. My wife, she's nuts. She likes doing all this extreme stuff. And this is going back, years where mud runs started getting really popular and she was doing all this stuff. And I would just go to be the cameraman, right? And because I wasn't going to do that stuff. I was like, I was doing mud runs before they were cool. Yeah, that was my excuse. In reality, I just didn't want to, I was like, forget that. But, her and then my kids are athletes, all wrestlers and football. So there was always, I was always cooking healthy meals and she was always cooking healthy meals for them, and it's like, it's ridiculous if I'm making all these vegetables and, good carbs and good protein sources and me not eating that. And, it just, it was started to begin. Okay, it goes back to, practicing what you preach, right? How am I supposed to tell my kids to do? That was his huge thing with my wife is, she hates that. Do as you're, as you told, not as you see or whatever. You know what I mean? What our parents tell us, we're telling you to do something. Don't do what I do, but it just, that wouldn't fly here. That wouldn't fly. She held us all accountable. And
that's terrific.
Yeah. So, I mean, health wise, eating wise, it was just there. It was just a matter of me joining in on them, and showing them, look, I can do it. I can get back to a place where, I can now go out for a run with you guys, or, we can go plan a mountain climbing, trip or athletic stuff instead of just like, okay, driving, go to a movie, sit and have popcorn, that, I mean, which is fun too. We missed that definitely after this last year, but fitness as a family, it really adds a different dynamic.
It becomes it becomes so much more sustainable for everybody, right? When everybody's on board, just like that, you guys are modeling what you're preaching, with the nutrition, the fitness, your children are involved with it. I mean, that's a great recipe for success. It's very hard when you're the only one and everybody else is kind of going the other direction.
Exactly. Definitely. It's huge. You hold everybody accountable. And it's like, my daughter's really good about that. When we go grocery shopping, she likes to tag along because she knows she gets to pick out what she likes.
Yeah.
And so I used to be notorious for, going down a cookie aisle. I got a sweet tooth, and she'd always, and I would get irritated, honestly, and I'd have to say sorry afterwards because I would get irritated when she'd tell me, no, put that back. And she's literally pushing my hand away from these, Chips Ahoy's or Oreos or whatever. And it's like, it's so funny. She's 12 and she knows that she's, looking out for me to make better choices. So now it's like she sees me drinking water instead of Gatorade. That was a huge step for me too, with the sugar. And she's like, "Oh, good, you're drinking water." And it's like, yes. So we all have these, hydro flask or containers that have time stamps where you should drink that much. Yeah. So the kids, they all drink water, and found myself buying cases and cases of water instead of cases of Gatorade and soda. Great. So it's been a whole, shift for all of us. So, and it's like, if I'm the one shopping and buying all this stuff, I should be, doing the same. So, definitely family is been key. It's been important. It's been everything. Family's everything.
It is. Yes. 100%. Ed, when did you first learn about Catch a Lift?
I heard about Catch a Lift. I try to go back to some of my emails because I remember corresponding with Lynn early on, and I couldn't find anything before 2015, I think. So it might have been 2014, and there might have been through Facebook. It had to have been through Facebook, I think.
Okay.
Because I don't know if any other platforms what was big back then. But anyway, I reached out and I started following. I was like, wow, I think at the time it was gym memberships or, home equipment. And I was like, really not ready to be going into a gym with huge crowds. And I said, okay, well, let's try this. And I remember this cargo truck pulling up and this pallet getting unloaded into my driveway. And I'm like, what in the world? Really?
What do we got coming here?
It's got like all these bumper plates and kettlebells and dumbbells. And it's like, wow, this is pretty cool. I couldn't thank her enough. I couldn't thank all you guys enough for that. Cause that's really, it makes it, the motivation is you open your garage. This is, we have our third car garage. We're fortunate enough to have a third car space and turned it into a gym. We, with mats and everything for, all of us to use. And you open your garage to come home and you're looking at your gym. It's like, come on, you can't, it's just too convenient. It's right there.
It is, right?
Telling you, just get it done.
It eliminates those excuses. Yeah,
exactly. So it's super easy to get in the mode of, okay, I can do 25 minutes. 25 minutes is okay. Yeah. So, but that, and I believe, I think for a while there was a couple different programs that Cal was doing with platoons, I believe. Squad leaders, maybe, I think it was. So there was, some follow-up phone calls that I would get just to check in with me and see how things were going. And I thought that was really, really cool. It wasn't just a program where, well, here you go, and
one and done.
Best of luck. It was more than that. And even more so now with all this coaches, I had no idea, when Kaylee reached out to me, I was like, what, you guys want to talk to me? Why, And so it was, you guys, Catch a Lift, it's gotten so big, and it's just full of like-minded individuals and veterans, and really, it's just we all want to see each other succeed. At the end of the day, just keep moving forward, little steps. And if we're fortunate enough to live near one another, get a workout in together, and. So it's definitely been, you guys have been a godsend, really. I can't say enough good thing about Catch a Lift, and everybody involved in it. It's been awesome.
Yeah, it's a phenomenal organization. I have one other question that I'm going to hit on Catch a Lift. That'll be our last one. But before we
Sure.
get there, we do have a question down from the folks watching on YouTube that I want to push up to
Yeah.
you.
Okay.
So Joe asks, what would you tell your younger self when you were discharging from the Marines?
Wow, that's
It's a good one, right?
yeah, that is. Yeah. I would, of course, you want to hear the cliche of everything's gonna get better, because for a long time there's no way you'll believe that.
Yeah.
I think I would have told myself to just keep putting one foot in front of another. Don't drop your pack. That was big for us, and and I'm sure across every branch knows what that means of just giving up, just dropping your pack where you stand. And I would tell myself that don't drop your pack, because I remember the day I did still, and keep moving forward one step in front of the other. So I think that might have resonated with me more than anything else.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. All right, Ed, one final question here for you today. What does it mean to you to be a Catch a Lift Fund veteran athlete?
It means that I got to do my part to be there for my fellow catch lift brothers and sisters. There's got to be we talked about it, support systems. Yeah. It means that I'm part of something bigger than me. Just like being in the military, it's not just about me. There's more of us. There's more of us out there that haven't been found yet, haven't been looking for help yet, haven't been reaching out. And there has to be a community of us that are still here, that have experienced one or two setbacks, and ready to continue to help and carry each other forward. I mean, that's what we need to do. We all need to carry each other.
Yes.
We all have the same, in one way, shape, or form. We're all the same. We're all the same. So yeah, that definitely. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Ed, thank you so much first and foremost, for your service to our great country. And thank you for coming on and sharing all this with us today. Is just absolutely terrific. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's our pleasure. That's it for this week's episode of Coach's Corner. We will return next Wednesday, 1 Eastern time, with another episode. Thank you, Ed, again, for sharing your story and your light with us all. It was just absolutely fantastic. Thank you to ClearBridge for your support of all things Catch a Lift. Huge thank you to Lynn Coughlin, Henry Pomper, Kaylee Nasiri for all you do to make this podcast possible, and to the entire Catch a Lift team. Until next week, keep it real and stay Cal strong.